Marcus Chen had spent 8 years as a Navy SEAL, surviving missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Somalia that would break most men. But now, standing in the galley of the cargo vessel Atlantic Dawn at 3 a.m., chopping onions for the morning shift, he wondered if this was his strangest assignment yet. The crew of 43 had no idea that their quiet, methodical cook had once led Black Ops missions behind enemy lines. To them, he was just another guy trying to make an honest living on the high seas. Little did they know that in less than 72 hours, his true skills would mean the difference between life and death for every soul on board. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Atlantic Dawn cut through the choppy waters of the Gulf of Aden, her hull loaded with construction equipment bound for Dubai. Captain Rodriguez had hired Marcus 3 months ago in Baltimore, impressed by his references and the fact that he didn't ask too many questions about overtime pay. What the captain didn't know was that those references came from a carefully constructed identity created by naval intelligence. Marcus Chen wasn't even his real name. Born Daniel Harrison in small-town Nebraska, he'd joined the Navy at 18 after his father's farm went under. 12 years later, he was one of the most decorated SEALs in Team 6, with commendations he could never talk about and scars that told stories he'd never share. But his last mission in Syria had gone sideways in ways that still kept him awake at night. When his commanding officer offered him this undercover assignment, tracking suspected arms, smuggling routes through commercial shipping lanes, it seemed like the perfect way to serve his country without the weight of life and death decisions crushing down on him every day. The galley suited him better than he'd expected. There was something meditative about the repetitive motions of food preparation, the precise timing required to feed a crew in shifts around the clock. His mother had taught him to cook during summers on the farm, and military training had honed his efficiency to a razor's edge. The crew appreciated his cooking more than they'd ever appreciated his marksmanship. "Marcus, you got any more of those biscuits from yesterday?" A first mate Jimmy Patterson asked, poking his head into the galley as Marcus prepped vegetables for the lunch shift. "Fresh batch coming out in 10 minutes, Marcus replied, not looking up from his knife work. His hands moved with mechanical precision, each slice uniform and deliberate. Old habits died hard. Patterson lingered in the doorway, studying Marcus with curiosity. "You know, for a cook, you sure move like the military. My brother was in the army. You got that same way about you." Marcus finally looked up, offering a practiced smile. "A couple years in the Coast Guard when I was young. Old habits, you know." It wasn't entirely a lie. He had trained with Coast Guard units during joint operations. The best covers always contained threads of truth, Coast Guard, hun. "That explains why you don't get seasick like the rest of these landlubbers." Patterson laughed, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "Captain's lucky to have found you. The last cook we had couldn't boil water without burning it." As Patterson left, Marcus returned to his prep work, but his mind was already cataloguing details he'd observed over the past 3 months. The ship's manifest showed standard construction equipment, but some of the cargo containers felt wrong when he'd helped load them. Too light for what they supposedly contained. Too carefully guarded by the shipping company's representatives. The crew was clean. He'd run background checks on all of them through his contacts at Naval Intelligence. Working-class guys from ports all along the eastern seaboard, most with families back home, all just trying to make a living. Captain Rodriguez ran a tight but fair ship, and the men respected him. If Marcus's suspicions were correct, none of them knew what they were really carrying. His real mission was simple: observe, document, and report. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. After what happened in Damascus, his superiors wanted him in a support role, gathering intelligence rather than acting on it. The plan was to complete this 6-month assignment, help build a case against the shipping company's executives, and then decide whether he wanted to return to active duty or transition to civilian life. That plan had worked perfectly for 3 months. Until today, the morning had started normally enough. Marcus was up at 4 a.m. as always, preparing breakfast for the early watch. Coffee strong enough to wake the dead, eggs scrambled just right, bacon crispy but not burned. The routine calmed him, gave structure to days that might otherwise blur together in the endless ocean. But at 6:15 a.m., as he was cleaning the grill, he caught a fragment of conversation from the bridge radio that made his blood run cold. Coast Guard chatter about increased pirate activity in their shipping lane. 3 vessels had been boarded in the past week, crews taken hostage, cargo stolen. The pirates were getting bolder, better organized, and they were operating in exactly the waters the Atlantic Dawn would be crossing in 2 days. Marcus finished his cleaning methodically, but his mind was racing. The ship had minimal security, no armed guards, no defensive measures beyond basic safety protocols. Captain Rodriguez was a good man and an experienced sailor, but he'd never faced armed pirates. Neither had his crew. As Marcus served breakfast to the morning watch, he observed each man with new eyes. Patterson was a solid former high school linebacker who'd kept in decent shape. Chief Engineer Walsh was pushing 60, but had steady hands and nerves. Radio Operator Davis was young but sharp, always alert to changing conditions. They were good men, but they weren't warriors. The ship's layout flashed through Marcus's mind like a tactical map. He knew every corridor, every storage compartment, every potential defensive position. In his bunk, hidden beneath a false bottom in his sea chest, lay gear that officially didn't exist: a compact rifle, ammunition, communication equipment, and other tools of his former trade. Gear he'd hoped never to use again. By noon, as he served lunch to the second watch, Marcus had made his decision. He would continue his cover, continue being the ship's cook, but he would also begin preparing for the possibility that his old skills might be needed. Quietly, carefully, without alerting the crew or blowing his mission, he started with reconnaissance, using his meal service as an excuse to move throughout the ship. The Atlantic Dawn was 400 feet long, with superstructure amidships and cargo holds fore and aft. The bridge offered good visibility, but was exposed. The engine room provided cover, but limited escape routes. The cargo holds were vast, but could become death traps if sealed. Most importantly, he began studying the crew's routines, identifying who would be where during different shifts. In a crisis, knowing the location of non-combatants would be crucial for any defensive strategy. That evening, as he prepared dinner, Marcus allowed himself a moment of dark humor. 3 months ago, his biggest worry had been whether the bacon was cooked properly. Now he was mentally calculating fields of fire and planning contingencies for a pirate attack that might never come. But as he looked out at the darkening ocean through the galley porthole, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his peaceful assignment was about to come to a very violent end. The morning of the second day brought rough seas and Marcus's first real test of maintaining his cover under pressure. A hydraulic line burst in the galley's dishwashing system, flooding the floor with scalding water and grease. As chaos erupted around him, Marcus moved with calculated precision that bordered on supernatural. While other crew members scrambled and shouted, Marcus had already located the main shutoff valve, grabbed the proper tools from their exact locations, and begun repairs. His movements were economical, purposeful, each action flowing seamlessly into the next. Within 12 minutes, he had the system isolated, the flooding controlled, and temporary repairs in place. "Jesus, Marcus," Chief Engineer Walsh muttered, watching him work. "Where'd you learn to move like that?" "YouTube," Marcus replied without missing a beat, tightening the final connection. Amazing what you can learn online these days, but Walsh's eyes lingered on him longer than usual. Marcus noted the suspicion and filed it away. He'd been too efficient, too composed. Navy SEAL training had made crisis response second nature, but cooks weren't supposed to move like special operations personnel. The afternoon brought worse news. Captain Rodriguez called an emergency meeting in the mess hall, his weathered face grim. The entire crew gathered, their usual jovial chatter replaced by nervous tension. "Gentlemen, I won't sugarcoat this," Rodriguez began. Coast Guard reports indicate significant pirate activity directly ahead of our current route. 3 merchant vessels attacked in the past 48 hours. 1 crew member is still missing. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembled men. Marcus remained silent, observing reactions. Patterson's jaw tightened with determination. Young Davis went pale, but maintained composure. Seaman Foster, barely 22, looked genuinely terrified. Our options are limited, Rodriguez continued. We can divert south, adding 4 days to our journey and burning fuel we can't afford, or we can maintain course and hope for the best. Either way, we're implementing emergency protocols, effective immediately. Marcus watched as Rodriguez outlined basic security measures, locked bridge access, continuous radio monitoring, emergency signals. Standard merchant marine procedures, but woefully inadequate against organized pirates. These men had no idea what they were potentially facing. After the meeting, Marcus returned to the galley to prepare dinner, but his mind was working through tactical scenarios. Modern pirates weren't the romanticized figures from movies. They were sophisticated criminal organizations with military-grade equipment, intelligence networks, and zero regard for human life. They moved in fast boats, carried automatic weapons, and operated with the efficiency of special forces units. The Atlantic dawn was a sitting duck. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As he seasoned the evening's roast, Marcus made a decision that violated every protocol of his undercover mission. He couldn't let these men sail blindly into potential slaughter. But he also couldn't reveal his true identity without compromising ongoing intelligence operations that might prevent future attacks. He needed a middle path. That evening, Marcus approached Patterson during his watch on deck. The first mate was scanning the horizon with binoculars, his usual easy confidence replaced by visible tension. "Rough seas ahead," Marcus said quietly. "Joining him at the rail." "Literally and figuratively," Patterson replied. "Have you ever dealt with pirates before, Marcus?" "Not personally, but I've heard stories. Merchant marines talk, you know. Word gets around about what really happens during these attacks." Patterson lowered his binoculars. "What kind of stories?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "The successful attacks all follow similar patterns. Pirates use speedboats, approach from multiple angles, usually just before dawn, when visibility is poor but improving. They target the bridge first, cut communications, then secure the crew. The whole thing takes less than 10 minutes if they know what they're doing. You seem to know a lot about pirate tactics for a cook. I read a lot during off hours. Military history, tactical analysis. Keeps the mind sharp." Marcus paused, letting that sink in. "The crews that survive are the ones who don't panic, who have a plan, and who can buy time for help to arrive." Patterson studied him intently. "You think we should have a plan?" "I'm thinking that a 30-minute emergency meeting today covered about 5% of what we'd need to know if something actually happens." Over the next hour, Marcus shared carefully selected insights about maritime security, framing everything as information he'd read or heard secondhand. He suggested watch rotations that would place the most capable crew members in critical positions. He recommended communication protocols that would ensure redundant contact with rescue services. He outlined basic defensive positioning that might slow down attackers without seeming overtly military. Patterson absorbed every word, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed his own tactical intelligence. By the end of their conversation, Marcus realized he'd found an ally, someone who could help implement defensive measures without raising suspicions about his true background. "I'll talk to the captain about some of these ideas," Patterson said finally. "Frame them as suggestions from the crew. Standard precautions, you know." "Good idea." "And Patterson, maybe keep the specifics between us for now. No point in spooking the younger guys until we know more about the actual threat level." The next morning brought disturbing news over the radio. The missing crew from the previous pirate attack had been found, some alive, some not. The survivors described their attackers as disciplined, well-armed, and extremely violent. They'd taken the ship's cargo and disappeared into a maze of small islands that dotted the coastline. Marcus listened to the reports while preparing breakfast, his face impassive but his mind cataloguing every detail. These weren't desperate fishermen turned to piracy. This was a military-level organization with sophisticated logistics and brutal efficiency. As he served the morning meal, Marcus observed the crew's deteriorating morale. Conversations were subdued, nervous glances toward the horizon more frequent. Even Rodriguez seemed shaken by the latest intelligence reports. But Marcus also noticed something else. Patterson had quietly begun implementing some of the defensive suggestions from their previous evening's conversation. Watch rotations had subtly shifted to place more experienced crew members in key positions. Radio monitoring had increased. Emergency equipment had been moved to more accessible locations. The changes were small, seemingly random, but Marcus recognized the pattern of someone thinking tactically about ship defense. Patterson was more capable than he'd initially assessed. That afternoon, while the crew attended to their regular duties, Marcus made his most dangerous decision yet. He retrieved his hidden equipment and began a comprehensive security assessment of the ship. Moving through maintenance corridors and storage areas during shift changes, he identified defensive positions, escape routes, and potential weapons caches. The ship's tool inventory included several items that could serve as improvised weapons: acetylene torches, heavy wrenches, industrial chemicals. The cargo holds contained construction equipment that could provide cover or concealment. Most importantly, the engine room offered multiple levels and compartmentalized spaces that could serve as defensive strongholds. But as Marcus completed his reconnaissance, one fact became unavoidably clear. If professional pirates attacked the Atlantic Dawn, the crew's survival would depend entirely on factors beyond their control: the attacker's intentions, response time of rescue forces, and pure luck, unless, of course, they had someone aboard with the skills to change those odds. Standing in the empty cargo hold as afternoon shadows lengthened, Marcus faced the decision he'd been avoiding since receiving this assignment. Maintain his cover and hope for the best, or prepare to do what he'd been trained to do: protect innocent lives regardless of the personal cost. The sound of footsteps on metal decking interrupted his thoughts. Patterson appeared in the hatchway, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. "Marcus, you down here?" "Just checking something in the inventory," Marcus replied, moving away from the concealed equipment cache he'd been evaluating. Patterson descended the ladder, his expression thoughtful. "We need to talk about those stories you mentioned yesterday, about pirate tactics and crew survival." Marcus waited, maintaining his casual demeanor while internally preparing for a conversation that might change everything. "Because I've been thinking," Patterson continued, "and some of those suggestions you made, they weren't the kind of things you pick up from reading articles online." Marcus met Patterson's knowing gaze without flinching. The cargo hold suddenly felt smaller, the air thick with unspoken questions. 20 years of covert operations had taught him that the most dangerous moments often came not from enemies, but from allies who knew too much. "I'm not sure what you're getting at, Jimmy," Marcus said, using Patterson's first name deliberately to maintain their casual relationship. Patterson stepped closer, lowering his voice. "My brother Jake served 3 tours in Afghanistan. Marines. He came home different, moved different, talked different. Had this way of seeing everything as a potential threat or asset." He paused, studying Marcus's face. "Same way you've been looking at this ship since that pirate report came in." The silence stretched between them. Marcus calculated his options: deflect, deny, or trust. In Syria, hesitation at a moment like this had cost 3 good men their lives. "Your brother make it home okay?" Marcus asked. "Physically, yeah. Took him 2 years to stop checking corners everywhere he went." Patterson's voice carried understanding, not accusation. "Look, I don't care who you really are or what you did before. But if those pirates come for us, I need to know. Are you someone who can help keep my crew alive?" Marcus looked up at the cargo hold's steel ceiling, weighing operational security against human lives. His superiors would court-martial him for what he was about to do. Coast Guard, huh? Patterson pressed gently. Navy, Marcus said finally. Different kind of Navy, Patterson nodded slowly. Special operations? Something like that. And Jimmy, we need to have a conversation with Captain Rodriguez tonight. An hour later, the three men sat in Rodriguez's quarters, the captain's weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug as Marcus outlined the reality of their situation. He couldn't reveal his specific mission or the classified nature of his presence aboard the ship, but he could share tactical knowledge that might save lives. Professional pirates don't just steal cargo, Marcus explained. They evaluate targets weeks in advance. Our route, our schedule, our cargo manifest, it's all been studied. They know exactly when and where to hit us for maximum efficiency. Rodriguez leaned forward. You're saying they've been watching us? I'm saying they know everything about this ship except one thing. Marcus met the captain's eyes. They don't know about me. Patterson filled the silence. What kind of navy were you really in, Marcus? The kind that doesn't exist on paper. The kind that handles problems other people can't solve. Marcus stood, moving to the porthole. I've been tracking suspected arms shipments through this shipping lane for 3 months. My mission was observation only, but circumstances have changed. Rodriguez set down his coffee with shaking hands. Jesus Christ. We're carrying weapons? I don't think so. But someone thinks you are, and that makes you a target regardless. Marcus turned back to them. The question now is whether we use my skills to protect this crew or maintain my cover and hope for the best. What kind of skills are we talking about? Rodriguez asked. Marcus considered his answer carefully. The kind that might give us a fighting chance if 30 armed pirates board this ship at dawn. The next 12 hours transformed the Atlantic Dawn from a peaceful cargo vessel into something resembling a fortress. Working through the night, Marcus and Patterson implemented defensive measures that appeared routine to casual observation but created significant tactical advantages. Emergency. Lighting was repositioned to create blind spots for potential attackers while improving visibility for defenders. Tool caches were relocated to strategic positions throughout the ship. Communication equipment was hardened and backed up with redundant systems. Most critically, Marcus identified specific crew members who could handle themselves under pressure and quietly briefed them on emergency protocols. Foster and Williams stay below deck no matter what. Marcus instructed Patterson as they secured the engine room. They're good kids, but they'll panic. Davis has steady hands. He handles communications. Walsh knows every pipe and valve on this ship. He's our mobility specialist if we need to move through maintenance areas. Patterson absorbed the tactical assignments without question. His military brother had prepared him to recognize competence when he saw it. What about the cargo? Patterson asked. If they're after weapons that aren't there, then we use their expectations against them. Let them think they found what they're looking for while buying time for rescue forces to arrive. Marcus secured a tool locker that now contained improvised weapons. The key is making them believe they're in control while systematically reducing their options. Dawn came too quickly. Marcus was in the galley, maintaining his cover by preparing breakfast, when Davis's voice crackled over the intercom. Bridge to all stations. Multiple contacts bearing northwest, approaching fast. Through the galley porthole, Marcus spotted them. 3 speedboats cutting through the morning swells like knives, their hulls dark against the grey ocean. Even at distance, he could see armed figures in each boat, their movements coordinated and purposeful. All hands, this is the captain. Rodriguez's voice carried forced calm over the ship's speakers. We have unknown vessels approaching. All crew report to designated emergency stations immediately. Marcus moved with practiced efficiency, securing the galley and retrieving his hidden equipment. The compact rifle felt familiar in his hands, muscle memory overriding 3 months of careful civilian behavior. He clipped extra magazines to his belt and activated a communication device that would alert naval intelligence to the developing situation. But as he prepared to shed his cook's identity forever, Marcus realized the weight of what he was about to do. Once he revealed his true nature, there would be no going back. His cover would be blown, his mission compromised, his future in intelligence work finished. The sound of automatic weapons fire from the ship's bow made the decision for him. Racing through corridors he now knew better than any blueprint, Marcus reached his first defensive position as the pirates' grappling hooks clanged against the Atlantic Dawn's hull. Through a porthole, he watched black-clad figures rappelling down ropes with military precision, their weapons and equipment marking them as far more dangerous than typical maritime criminals. These men moved like soldiers. The bridge radio crackled with panicked voices. Coast Guard dispatchers trying to coordinate response. Other ships in the area reporting the attack. Rescue helicopters spinning up from the nearest base. Help was coming, but it would take at least 40 minutes to arrive. In naval combat, 40 minutes was an eternity. Marcus activated his throat microphone, switching to a frequency that would reach Patterson and Rodriguez simultaneously. "This is Marcus. I'm in position. Patterson, are the crew secured? Engine room and lower decks clear." Patterson's voice carried new respect. "Rodriguez is on the bridge with 2 men. Says he won't abandon his post. Copy that. Stay with the crew and keep them calm. I'm going to buy us some time." Through the maintenance corridor's observation window, Marcus watched the pirates' systematic advance. They moved in fire teams, covering each other's approaches, communicating through hand signals. Professional military training was evident in every movement, but they were advancing according to standard maritime boarding procedures, designed for overwhelming unarmed merchant crews through speed and intimidation. They expected no resistance beyond locked doors and frightened civilians. They had no idea that hidden in the shadows of the Atlantic Dawn, a man trained to hunt the world's most dangerous enemies was watching their every move, calculating range and wind speed, preparing to turn their perfect plan into a nightmare. Marcus chambered around and settled into firing position, his breathing automatically shifting to the controlled rhythm of a sniper. Through his scope, the lead pirate's face came into sharp focus, young, confident, completely unaware that his life now hung in the balance of a decision made by a man who officially didn't exist. The cook was gone. The Navy SEAL had returned. Marcus's finger found the trigger as chaos erupted across the Atlantic Dawn's deck. The lead pirate, a scarred man with tactical gear worth more than most crew members' annual salaries, raised his assault rifle toward the bridge where Captain Rodriguez stood defiant behind reinforced glass. The shot that changed everything came from Marcus's position in the superstructure's shadow. The .308 round caught the pirate leader center mass, dropping him instantly and sending his team scrambling for cover behind cargo containers. The sound of precision rifle fire echoed across the ocean like thunder. What the hell was that? The panicked voice crackled through the pirate's radio frequency, which Marcus had intercepted using his intelligence equipment. "Sniper! We've got a goddamn sniper!" Another voice, thick with accent Marcus couldn't immediately place. "Kowalski's down!" This was supposed to be a soft target. Through his scope, Marcus watched the remaining pirates' tactical formation dissolve into confusion. They'd planned for intimidated civilians, not accurate return fire from a concealed position. Their advantage in numbers meant nothing if they couldn't locate the threat. Marcus keyed his throat mic. "Patterson, status report. All crew accounted for in secure positions. Rodriguez is still on the bridge. Stubborn bastard won't leave his post. Good. Keep everyone down and away from windows." This is about to get very loud. The second speedboat's team had made it aboard during the confusion, rappelling onto the stern while Marcus engaged the forward team. These pirates moved with better discipline, using proper fire and movement tactics as they advanced toward the superstructure. Marcus shifted position, using maintenance tunnels he'd memorized during his reconnaissance. The ship's layout became his greatest weapon. He knew every angle, every choke point, every piece of cover. The pirates were operating in hostile territory without maps. Emerging through a service hatch near the engine room, Marcus caught the stern team in a crossfire position they never saw coming. Two quick shots from his concealed location sent them diving behind inadequate cover. Their confident advance stalled. "Bridge to unknown shooter," Captain Rodriguez's voice carried over the ship's intercom, broadcasting to friend and foe alike. "Coast Guard ETA 32 minutes. Can you hold them that long?" Marcus couldn't respond without revealing his position, but 32 minutes felt like 32 hours when facing professional killers with superior numbers and firepower. He needed to change the tactical equation. The third speedboat circled the ship like a shark, its crew providing overwatch while radioing instructions to the boarding teams. Through his scope, Marcus identified the boat's commander, an older man with the bearing of a former military, probably the operation's tactical leader. Marcus made a calculated decision that violated every rule of defensive warfare. He went on the offensive. Using the ship's crane system, Marcus rappelled to a lower deck position that gave him an angle on the circling speedboat. The boat's commander was directing his teams through a sophisticated communication system, coordinating a pincer movement designed to trap Marcus between converging forces. The range was extreme for a precision shot from a moving platform, but Marcus had made harder shots under worse conditions. He controlled his breathing, calculated for the boat's movement pattern, and squeezed the trigger. The speedboat commander dropped, and with him, the pirates' tactical coordination. Suddenly, the boarding teams were operating without central command, their sophisticated plan reduced to individual survival instincts. "Command boat, respond!" The radio chatter revealed growing panic. "We're taking effective fire from multiple positions. This isn't a merchant crew." Marcus smiled grimly at their confusion. His movement between positions created the illusion of multiple defenders, a psychological warfare tactic that multiplied his apparent strength. Fear was becoming his ally, but the pirates adapted faster than he'd hoped. The remaining speedboat moved to a safer distance and began laying down, suppressing fire with a mounted machine gun. Heavy rounds chewed through the ship's superstructure, forcing Marcus to deeper cover. "Patterson, I need you to create a distraction," Marcus radioed. "Something that draws their attention away from my position." "What kind of distraction?" "Remember those acetylene tanks we moved yesterday? Time to put them to use." 10 minutes later, an explosion rocked the ship's port side as Patterson ignited a controlled blast in an empty cargo hold. Flames and smoke billowed from the detonation point, creating the perfect cover for Marcus's next move. While the pirates focused on the apparent emergency, Marcus infiltrated their stern position using routes they couldn't have anticipated. The maintenance shafts and ventilation systems he'd mapped during his reconnaissance became an invisible highway through the ship's interior. He emerged behind the pirates' defensive position, like a ghost materializing from shadows. 4 men, well-armed and well-trained, but focused entirely in the wrong direction. Marcus's suppressed sidearm whispered death 4 times in rapid succession. The forward team, now cut off from reinforcement, found themselves trapped between Marcus's mobile defense and the ship's crew, who had begun using the improvised weapons caches to block key corridors and stairwells. "This is insane." The radio chatter revealed a complete breakdown of pirate morale. "We've lost half the team to one shooter. I say we cut our losses and run," but their boat commanders had other ideas. The remaining speedboat moved closer, preparing for a final assault that would overwhelm Marcus through sheer firepower. The mounted machine gun swiveled toward his last known position. Marcus realized he had one advantage the pirates couldn't counter. He knew exactly what cargo the ship was really carrying. Racing through corridors filled with smoke from Patterson's distraction blast, Marcus reached the forward cargo hold. Hidden among legitimate construction equipment were containers that his 3-month investigation had identified as something far more dangerous: military-grade explosives, being smuggled to buyers who didn't appear on any government manifest. The irony wasn't lost on him. Pirates seeking weapons they thought the ship carried were about to discover that their assumptions were correct. just not in the way they'd expected. Marcus began preparing a surprise that would end the battle definitively. But as he worked with explosive materials that could sink the ship if mishandled, he realized the terrible mathematics of his situation. Saving the crew might require destroying the very vessel they called home. The radio crackled with new urgency. Coast Guard cutters on radar. 20 minutes out. We finish this now or we don't finish it at all. 20 minutes. Marcus looked at the explosives in his hands, then at the ship that had become his temporary home, then at the pirates who threatened 43 innocent lives. Some calculations were simple, even when the consequences were devastating. The final phase of the battle was about to begin, and Marcus Chen, the cook who was never really a cook, prepared to make choices that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Marcus's hands worked with surgical precision as he rigged the explosive charges, muscle memory from countless demolition operations guiding his movements. The irony burned like acid in his throat. The weapons he'd spent 3 months tracking were now the only things standing between his crew and certain death. The ship shuddered under renewed machine gun fire from the remaining speedboat. Through the cargo hold's reinforced porthole, Marcus watched tracers streak across the dawn sky like deadly fireworks. The pirates had abandoned all pretense of taking prisoners. This had become a fight for survival on both sides. "Marcus, they're regrouping on the main deck," Patterson's voice crackled through the comm system. "Looks like they're preparing for a final push toward the bridge." Marcus finished wiring the last charge and activated a timer mechanism. "Jimmy, I need you to get everyone as far aft as possible. Engine room, crew quarters, anywhere below the waterline. What are you planning?" "Something that's going to save lives and probably end my career." Marcus sealed the explosive package and began moving toward his final position. "How many pirates left on deck?" "I count 8, maybe 10. "Hard to tell with all the smoke." The remaining pirates had indeed regrouped, forming a disciplined assault line that advanced methodically toward the ship's command center. These weren't the panicked survivors of Marcus's initial engagement. Someone had taken command and restored tactical order to their operation. Through his scope, Marcus identified the new leader, a woman in her 30s with the controlled movements of special forces training. She directed her team with hand signals, using cover effectively while maintaining steady pressure on the ship's defenders. Marcus found himself genuinely impressed. Under different circumstances, she might have been someone he'd have worked alongside rather than against, but circumstances were what they were. The woman's team reached the base of the superstructure, preparing to storm the bridge, where Captain Rodriguez maintained his defiant stand. Marcus could see Rodriguez through the bridge windows, gripping a flare gun, the only weapon available to him, with hands that shook despite his determined expression. Marcus made his choice. The first explosive charge detonated in cargo hold 3, creating a massive fireball that lit up the morning sky. The blast wasn't designed to sink the ship, but to simulate catastrophic damage that would force the pirates to recalculate their assault strategy. The psychological effect was immediate. Pirates dove for cover as debris rained down around them, their advance stalled by the apparent destruction of their primary target, the cargo they'd come to steal. Jesus Christ! The woman's voice carried clearly across the deck. "They're destroying the shipment rather than let us take it." Marcus triggered the second charge, this one in a forward hold that sent a column of flame and smoke hundreds of feet into the air. The Atlantic Dawn listed slightly to starboard, creating the impression of a vessel in mortal distress. The deception worked perfectly. The remaining speedboat moved closer to evacuate the boarding team, abandoning their assault in favor of escape before the ship became a total loss. But Marcus had miscalculated one crucial factor. The woman leading the pirates was too experienced to retreat without confirming the destruction of their target. Instead of fleeing, she led a desperate charge toward the cargo holds, determined to salvage whatever remained of the weapons shipment. Her team moved with the intensity of soldiers on a suicide mission, knowing that failure meant both financial ruin and the wrath of whoever had hired them. Marcus found himself caught between his explosive charges and an enemy force that refused to follow the script he'd written for them. The woman's tactical brilliance had turned his deception into a trap for himself. Racing through smoke-filled corridors, Marcus tried to reach a position where he could intercept the pirates before they discovered that the explosive damage was largely superficial. But the ship's layout, which had been his greatest advantage, now worked against him as smoke and debris blocked familiar routes. He emerged onto the main deck just as the woman's team breached cargo hold 2. Through the hatchway, Marcus could see her examining the legitimate construction equipment, her experienced eyes immediately recognizing that the explosions had been controlled detonations rather than accidental destruction. "It's a setup," she called to her team. "The cargo's intact. We've got a professional aboard this ship." The woman turned toward Marcus's position with the instincts of a predator sensing prey. For a moment that stretched like eternity, their eyes met across 50 feet of smoke-filled deck. Recognition passed between them, not of faces but of capabilities, each seeing in the other the reflection of their own deadly training. "Hello, soldier," she said, raising her weapon with fluid precision. Marcus rolled behind a cargo container as automatic fire chewed through the air where he'd been standing. The woman's team spread out in a practice flanking maneuver, using the ship's superstructure to close off his escape routes. But Marcus had one advantage they couldn't anticipate. He'd spent 3 months learning to think like a cook, not a soldier. The galley equipment he'd worked with daily became improvised weapons in ways no military manual would ever teach. The industrial-sized pressure cooker from the galley, rigged with a timer and filled with metal fragments from the ship's workshop, created a devastating anti-personnel device when detonated near the pirates' position. The explosion sent shrapnel screaming across the deck, forcing the assault team into cover that Marcus had deliberately prepared to become a killing zone. Steam lines from the galley's equipment, redirected through maintenance valves Marcus had modified during his reconnaissance, created a scalding fog that obscured vision while causing painful burns to anyone caught in the open, even the ship's emergency. Flare system became a weapon when Marcus triggered a coordinated launch that filled the air with brilliant, burning projectiles that forced the pirates to shield their eyes at the worst possible moment. The woman realized too late that she was fighting an enemy who had transformed the entire ship into a weapon. Every system, every piece of equipment, every structural element had become part of an integrated defense that existed nowhere in tactical manuals. "Fall back to the boat," she ordered, her voice carrying new respect for an opponent she'd underestimated. "This one's too expensive." But as her team began their retreat, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors echoed across the water. Coast Guard Seahawks appeared on the horizon, their approach vectors calculated to cut off the pirates' escape routes. The woman's tactical assessment was brutally simple: surrender to the Coast Guard and face lengthy prison sentences, or fight through Marcus's defenses and take hostages for bargaining leverage. She chose neither option. Instead, she made a decision that Marcus recognized with cold professional admiration. If she couldn't win, she would ensure that everyone lost. The woman began moving toward the ship's fuel tanks, carrying enough explosive charges to turn the Atlantic dawn into a fireball that would kill everyone aboard, pirates and crew alike. Marcus realized that his greatest enemy wasn't the woman's tactical skill or her team's firepower. It was her willingness to choose mutual destruction over defeat. A mindset he understood all too well from his own darkest missions. The final confrontation would be between two professionals who knew that some battles could only end with total sacrifice. The woman moved through the ship's bowels like a wraith, her explosive charges primed for detonation near the main fuel tanks. Marcus tracked her progress through security monitors he'd secretly accessed during his months aboard. Watching her systematic placement of devices that would turn the Atlantic Dawn into a floating crematorium, he had perhaps 3 minutes before she completed her work. Marcus descended into the ship's engineering spaces, abandoning stealth for speed. The Coast Guard helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights cutting through smoke and steam, but they couldn't intervene without risking the lives of everyone aboard. This final confrontation belonged to Marcus alone. He found her in the engine room's lowest level, calmly wiring the last charge to a fuel line that fed directly into the ship's main tanks. Her movements were methodical, professional, terrifyingly competent. "Impressive work up there," she said, without turning around. "Haven't faced opposition like that since Mogadishu. Somalia 2018. Marcus stepped into the compartment, his weapon trained on her back. "Good guess. You?" "Different war. Same story." Marcus kept his distance, knowing that someone with her skills could turn a conversation into a weapon. "Walk away from the charges. Your team's already gone." She completed the final connection and turned to face him, her hands raised but her posture relaxed. "Too relaxed. My name's Sarah Mitchell. Former Army EOD, 3 tours in Afghanistan before private sector work became more profitable. Daniel Harrison. Navy, various places that don't appear on maps." Marcus noted her positioning relative to the detonator. "This doesn't have to end with 43 people dying." "Actually, it does." Sarah's smile held no warmth. "You see, Daniel, this operation was never about the cargo. It was about testing something much more valuable. How effectively a trained operative could be identified and neutralized during a supposedly routine mission." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. "You knew. We've known since you came aboard. Your cover was excellent, your tradecraft flawless. But you underestimated how thoroughly we'd researched the Atlantic Dawn's crew. The real Marcus Chen died in a car accident 6 months ago." Marcus felt the tactical situation collapse around him. The entire attack had been an elaborate trap, designed to expose intelligence operatives working undercover in commercial shipping. His 3 months of careful observation had been matched by 3 months of enemy surveillance. "Who's we?" he asked, though part of him already knew. "Does it matter? There are buyers for information about American intelligence methods. Your techniques, your equipment, your procedures, all very valuable to the right parties." Sarah's hand drifted closer to the detonator. "The plan was to capture you alive, but you've proven more resourceful than anticipated. So you'll kill everyone aboard rather than admit failure. I'll complete the mission objective, eliminating a compromised intelligence asset and all evidence of this operation." Sarah's finger hovered over the detonation switch. "Your crew's deaths will be blamed on pirate violence. Very tragic, very believable." Marcus calculated angles and distances, knowing that any shot risking the detonator would achieve Sarah's objective anyway. She held the ultimate trump card, mutual assured destruction, but she'd made one critical error in her psychological assessment of her opponent. "You know what the difference is between us, Sarah?" Marcus lowered his weapon slightly, appearing to accept defeat. "You're fighting for money. I'm fighting for family." The subtle shift in his posture triggered Sarah's combat instincts a fraction of a second too late. Marcus wasn't surrendering. He was positioning himself for a tactic that violated every rule of hostage negotiation and personal survival. He dove directly at her, knowing that her trained response would be to trigger the detonator rather than risk capture. But Marcus had spent the last 30 seconds calculating the blast radius and structural integrity of the engine room's compartmentalized design. The explosion that followed was contained within the lower engineering spaces, powerful enough to kill anyone in the immediate area, but insufficient to breach the ship's hull or ignite the main fuel tanks. Marcus had turned Sarah's weapon against itself, sacrificing his own life to protect the crew he'd come to call family. The blast threw him against the engine room's bulkhead with bone-crushing force. As consciousness faded, he heard Patterson's voice over the intercom. coordinating damage control efforts with the arriving Coast Guard teams. Marcus drifted in and out of awareness as rescue personnel extracted him from the wreckage. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize injuries that should have been fatal, their professional voices mixing with helicopter rotors and radio chatter. "This one's got military tags," a Coast Guard medic reported. "Navy classification I've never seen before. Secure those," another voice ordered. "And keep the civilian crew away from this area until intelligence gets here." Through the haze of pain medication and trauma, Marcus heard Patterson arguing with federal agents about access to the engine room. The first mate's loyalty touched. Something deep in Marcus's battered psyche, proof that the bonds forged during 3 months of shared meals and honest work were stronger than the deceptions that had brought him aboard. Recovery took 6 weeks in a military hospital that officially didn't exist. Marcus's injuries were severe but not permanently disabling, a testament to the protective gear and positioning that had saved his life in the explosion. Debriefings with intelligence officials revealed the scope of the operation targeting American covert assets in commercial shipping. Sarah Mitchell had been part of a sophisticated network selling operational intelligence to hostile foreign governments. The attack on the Atlantic Dawn was one of several operations designed to identify and eliminate deep-cover operatives. Across multiple shipping lanes, Marcus's successful defense had not only saved 43 lives, but had exposed an intelligence leak that threatened dozens of ongoing operations worldwide. On a grey morning in Norfolk, Marcus stood on the dock, watching the rebuilt Atlantic Dawn prepare for departure. The ship bore scars from the battle, new plates welded over blast damage, updated security systems, crew quarters rearranged to accommodate additional safety measures. Captain Rodriguez approached, extending a calloused hand. "Job's still open if you want it. Best damn cook this ship ever had." Marcus smiled, knowing that his days of undercover work were finished. The Navy had offered him a training position, teaching survival techniques to a new generation of intelligence operatives. Honest work that wouldn't require lying about who he was. "Thanks, Captain, but I think it's time I stopped pretending to be someone else." Patterson joined them, grinning broadly. "Heard you're going to be teaching Navy hotshots how to cook their way out of trouble." Something like that. Marcus watched the crew making final preparations. Men who'd accepted him as family, despite learning that everything they'd known about him was false. "Take care of yourselves out there." As the Atlantic Dawn disappeared beyond the horizon, Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had brought him from the shadows of covert operations back into the light of honest service. He'd learned that the most important battles weren't always fought in exotic locations against mysterious enemies. Sometimes they were fought in ships' galleys and engine rooms, defending people who deserved protection simply because they were decent human beings trying to make an honest living. Marcus Chen. The cook was gone forever, but Daniel Harrison had finally found his way home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.